Well, this morning, I don't know if it's like this for you guys, but May has hit, and it seems to be a really big season for weddings. I don't know if anybody else is feeling the wedding vibes. Not this past week, but the week before, there were 3 weddings going on with people I knew. I was involved in 2 of them. And then the next weekend it was just wedding season. It's that time of year in Arkansas where the weather is not boiling hot yet, but there's a small sliver of time that you can do stuff outside, and so there's a lot of weddings. And so I know during a lot of these weddings you will hear people talk about the wedding ring. Whenever they do the ring, they talk about this perfect circle and how it's complete, and it's a loop, and they will go into detail about that. And that got me thinking about all kinds of other loops and circles and cycles, and that's kind of the direction I want to go this morning. When I think about a loop, the very first thing that comes to mind, I don't know if you guys are on TikTok or anything like that, or if you're like me and prefer the old school Vine. Anybody remember Vine? Am I talking to anybody here? I know all the college students are gone right now, but Vine was awesome. And so I think of a looping video, and there's nobody bigger on the internet with looping videos than a dude named Zach King. I want to give you a snippet of what a looping video looks like with him. Go ahead and play that.
Oh, shoot, no, not again. Ouch. Okay, hey, grab the net.
Okay.
Pull it back. Oh, that was close. Oh, shoot, no.
Yeah, you can get lost in his videos for like 30 minutes watching the same video over and over because it loops so seamlessly and it works so beautifully. Another one that you may be familiar with if you have ever been in school is something called the water cycle, okay? This is a loop. It's a cycle of things that happen. You kind of see there, there's condensation in the clouds. Come on, y'all know this, okay? Remember your elementary school days. It falls in the form of rain. It waters the ground. It evaporates up back into the clouds, and we start the whole thing over again. It's the water cycle. It's a circle. Speaking of Zach King, speaking of kings, there was a great 1900s African king who talked a great deal about circles. His name was Mufasa, okay? The great circle of life, anybody, right? Come on. A lion dies. He goes into the ground. It becomes grass. The antelope eat the grass. The lion eats the antelope. It's the come on, y'all sing it. It's the... Hey, David, don't hold auditions for worship anytime soon. Okay. There's another one that I found on the internet I want to show you guys because this is a real-world application of what a cycle looks like. This is if when a mom asks one son to go tell the other son that dinner's ready. Go ahead and put that one up there. Mom sends him to go get dinner. He goes, dinner? Mom says, no, I want you to go get him. Goes to the living room. Oh, look, a TV. What was I doing? I'll go ask mom. And then we start the loop all over again. If you have kids or have ever dealt with teenagers, this is just the truth. This is how a loop works. You get stuck in this cycle. And there's another more spiritual example of what a cycle kind of looks like and that I want to look at today. So if you got a Bible or a Bible app, I want you to go to Romans chapter 10. Romans chapter 10, I'm going to start in 13. And really, I'm going to spend most of the day sitting here at Romans chapter 10, verses 13 through 15, and we're just going to kind of go through it a little bit one by one. If you're a note taker, I'm gonna really help you out in just a second, but I want to go ahead and read it. Romans chapter 10, verse 13. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That is why the scriptures say, how beautiful are the feet of messengers who bring good news. This was actually one of the verses of the day on the YouVersion Bible app this week, and I saw it and it just really resonated with me. I've read it so many times, but for some reason this week it just hit a little bit differently. And I love how Paul arranges this. He kind of works backwards. He kind of talks about where you are right now, and then he goes, well, you can't do that until you've done this, and he walks back this step. And the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? This makes a beautiful cycle. And I want to go ahead and show you this next image. For all the note takers out there, take a picture or write this down because these are all my points this morning. I'm giving them to you early. because I'm going to go through this like Paul did, and it's a little bit backwards, and so I want to make sure you kind of see this visually, what we're talking about. There's the call, there's the believe, the hear, the tell, the go. And this circles back. It keeps going and going. So when we see this, now some of you are going to write all these notes down, and then you're going to go immediately and watch Zach King videos. You want to see more of those in just a second. And you know what? I get it. But what I want to do is I want to talk about this in the same order that Paul did, because Paul was a very intelligent person. He was a very intelligent man. He had a great understanding, I believe, of the human mind and kind of how people thought and where they were. And he speaks like directly to the issue of the church he's writing to and the people. Now, for some of us today, it kind of comes across as brash. It comes across as stubborn. It comes across as just blatant and aggressive. But I really do believe that Paul was writing to specific people at a specific time. It's easy for us sometimes when we read, especially Paul's letters and the Bible as a whole, and think that it's speaking directly to us, but we have to remember historical context. The Bible is for us, but it's not written specifically to you and me. It's inspired by God. We have these for a reason, but Paul was writing to a very real group of people in Rome, in Ephesus, in Philippi, and all these specific places. He was writing to talk about their specific issues, and sometimes that gets lost, but we have to remember when Paul is being aggressive and assertive and writing specific things, he's talking to a specific group of people, and he knows his audience very, very well. As he's writing Romans, he's speaking to both newly converted Jewish Christians, and he's speaking as well to the Gentile Christians. So you have the Jewish community that grew up with the Torah and knowing about God and the sacrifice and the law and all this kind of stuff. And you had Gentiles who were completely new to a lot of this stuff. They may have worshiped other gods or done other things. And so Paul is trying to beautifully wedge and weave these two groups of people together and let them know about who Jesus is and why we believe the things we believe and things like that. He references in a lot of his letters, especially right here, he references Old Testament scriptures because he knows the Jewish community is going to connect with that. They're going to connect the Old Testament with what is going on right now. And he's making it easy to understand for the Gentiles. He recognizes that while Jews understood God and the law, Gentiles needed to be kind of told to open their ears to hear. So he's trying to connect the dots and complete this circle. And this, what we're talking about this morning, I think is like a formula. I hate math. Anybody else hate math? It's like the worst thing ever. I hate math. I'm really, really bad at it. What's funny is, and my mom's in here somewhere, I was a homeschool kid. It makes sense now, right? No, stop with the jokes. But she always told me, and I was in public school for a while at the beginning, and teachers would tell you, you're never going to have a calculator with you all the time. You didn't know about Steve Jobs. But I'm so glad that exists because I'm really bad at math. But when I look at this text this morning, it's like a formula. The formula stays the same. You plug in where you're at and the things that you know, and the rest kind of fill in to help solve something. It's the same formula that Paul talked about that has been used for thousands of years leading up to today. So what's the first thing that Paul mentions? First thing is call. Romans 10:13, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Now, there are two types of people in this world today, and two types of people in this room. Those that prefer to text, and those that prefer to call. How many of you are text first? Like, don't even bother dialing the phone, just send me a text. How many of you like the phone call? You want to talk on the phone, okay. Here's the deal. It is really, really, really important that you know what the other person is. Honestly, it should be added to the 5 love languages. There should be 6. Words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, receiving gifts, and do you prefer calling or texting? Because if you do not know this about your significant other, your friend, your boss, whatever, then it could be some weird and awkward interactions, all right? And it's mainly for the people who prefer text first. I'm one of those people, so I can speak to our community. If you call a texter, like, we're not answering the phone. I mean, one of two things runs through our head. Who's dying? That's like the first thought is, oh no, it's bad news. Something bad has happened. Or it's probably a butt dial because they know me. They know I don't want to talk on the phone. You text first and then you call if you need to, if it's really important. There are some times where you do need to call first, where you really want to talk or something like that, but you need to know. But one thing I do know is whether you're a caller first or a texter first, we can all agree on one thing. You do not answer a call from an unknown number. Can I get an amen? Just let it go to voicemail. In fact, my phone just it doesn't even ring. It just goes straight to voicemail. I'm not answering it. Because one of two things, either I don't know you, or I do know you, but I don't have your phone. And if I do know you, then you should know not to call me. Just text me. Paul is obviously not talking about a phone call to Jesus in this point, but he is referencing, remember how I said that Paul would reference Old Testament scriptures. He's referencing at the beginning, Joel 2:32. And when you translate this to how Paul is writing in the Greek, this is what it says. Call upon translates to cry out. To cry out, so out like of desperation or I need help, I need assistance. And will be saved in the Greek translates to healed or restored or made whole. So essentially what Paul is saying right here and what Scripture is telling us and what the Old Testament what all these things tell us is that when you call upon the Lord, for everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord, cries out in desperation, I'm in agony, I need assistance, you will be saved, you will be healed, you will be restored, you will be set free. This is an action of faith. It's an act of faith. And faith is an action. It's a verb. It's a doing thing. In order for the miracle to come, there has to be an action taken. Now, that miracle could be salvation. Maybe there's a specific need that you have. Maybe there's a circumstance you're trying to get through. If you want the miracle to happen, there must be an action take place first. We see this time and time and time again through Scripture. In fact, if you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard me speak on this very point many times because it's something that feedback I get from people all the time, it's a step that a lot of us tend to miss completely. We think that, well, I have faith in Jesus, that should be enough for just everything to just fall in place. No, there's an action on our part. We have to be active participants in a relationship with Jesus. And this connects with what James says in James chapter 2, verse 17. So also, faith by itself, if it doesn't have works, is dead. You have to have both. This is an action thing. The stone had to be rolled away before Lazarus could come out. Before a man could see, mud got put in his eyes, and he had to go wash. You can go down the list of a lot of Jesus' miracles required action on the part of the believer. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pretty. You do not have to have everything lined out. Your life doesn't have to be totally together. You don't have to be a seminary graduate. You don't have to be a theologian or a pastor or a prayer warrior. You don't have to be a Christian for 30 plus years to make this work. All you have to do is be willing to take the step. But before we can call on Jesus, we have to believe. If you go backwards in this cycle just a step, there's belief first. But how can they call on him to save unless they believe in him? Belief is different than faith. And a lot of times we use these two words very interchangeably, but they're very different things. Let me give you an example. We all know that if I get into an airplane, that airplane takes off, goes a few thousand feet up in the air. I strap on parachute, I open hatch, I jump out of plane, pull the ripcord, parachute's going to open, I will land safely back on Earth. We know that. That's a fact, okay? It's been done. We know it. It's a fact. But it's a whole different ballgame to get into the plane, to put the chute on. A whole different thing to open the door and just next level to take that step out. That's faith. That's the difference between faith and belief. Belief is knowing, yeah, those facts line up. I know that to be true. Faith is the action of doing it and trusting those facts. We have to have belief before we can have faith. I can't walk in faith in my relationship with Jesus and do the things he's asked me to do without first believing that Jesus is who he says he is. So how do we know Jesus is real? Well, nearly, I don't want to say everybody, but nearly everybody, atheists, archaeologists, theologians, everybody believes that Jesus was a real person. We have all the facts to know that Jesus was a real human being who lived on earth. We have a lot of historical evidence to back it up. The most famous person in Jesus' day was Tiberius Caesar. And in the 150 years around from when he was alive, there was about 10 people who wrote about him. They wrote manuscripts and documents about his life. Within that same time span with Jesus, there were 42 people that wrote about Jesus. 4 times as many. Nobody questions whether or not Caesar was a real person. I love how God works sometimes. When he knows it's important, he tends to be a little extra. He goes over and above and beyond. That'll preach a whole different sermon. Come on. I mean, like in our own lives, he'll do that as well. So we know Jesus was a real person. We know he really lived in that era and that time. So how do we know that what is said in the Gospels is gospel? It's real. That he is God, that the miracles he performed are true, that he died, that he rose again. Well, there's a guy I follow online. He's a pastor up in Connecticut. I'm going to butcher his last name, but Cliff Nechtel, something like that. He's a great follow on social media because he's just a pastor at a church in Connecticut, but he'll go to colleges and he will gracefully debate people. And he'll just have conversations with people who either disagree about faith or they have a different stance on something. And the reason I love watching him is because he does it better than a lot of people that I know. Some people get hot-headed and angry and they'll just spew word vomit all over people. He takes a gentle approach. He doesn't shy away from facts and truth, but he takes a gentle approach and an honest and direct approach. He hears people out. So I just love how he does it. And I saw a video one time and he said he uses 4 tests to determine whether any historical document is true or false. He's used this with United States documents, other world religions, other world governments. He uses it with everything. He's got 4 tests that he uses, and he used them on the Gospels, and here are his 4 tests. The first test is contradictions. Do the authors of the Gospels, do they contradict each other? Are they saying different things? Are they going in different directions? And the answer is no. At times, you may have one gospel leave something out. Another one may emphasize a little bit different. Those are called different perspectives. These are 4 different people who are sharing the same idea or the same story and the same thing they saw, but from 4 different perspectives. One's a doctor, one's just a disciple. You have all these different perspectives. The second test is literary style. How is it written down? Is it like a fairy tale, once upon a time, that kind of thing? No, the Gospels are written as a historical narrative. They give specific times, dates, locations, people, all right? The third one is archaeology. We're not talking about Atlantis or Narnia or Tatooine, okay? We're talking about Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, all these actual places, Rome. We're talking about real people, Caesar, Pontius Pilate. These are historically verifiable places in the world. And then the fourth one is consistency. There are over 5,000 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscripts written in connection with the Gospels, different tellings of the Gospels. And they all line up to like nearly 0% difference in any of them. They line up perfectly. Plus you have the eyewitness accounts, disciples, the hundreds of people who saw Jesus risen from the dead, went on, many of them martyred. And you would think, if he was not who he said he was, if he didn't raise from the dead, somebody would have been convinced to say, yeah, it was all fake. Yeah, it didn't really happen. But we don't see that. Time after time, yeah, I know it happened. You can do whatever you want to me. I believe it. I know what I saw. So we have to believe. But before we can believe in him, we have to first hear. Verse 14 goes on to say, and how can they believe if they haven't heard about him? And I've heard many times in my ministry career, Craig, how can I hear more from God? How can I hear the voice of God? It feels like I never hear God. It feels like I hear all these people saying they've heard from God and God told me to tell you. And I just don't ever hear it. And my response has always been the same. Whether it's a teenager, an adult, it doesn't matter. My response has always been the same. Are you actually listening for him? Are you taking a minute and listening? I love my wife very dearly, but I have a problem sometimes when she talks. It's a medical problem, I believe, where she will say something and there's just some part of my brain at some point that just shuts off. And she will say, did you hear that? I'm like, yeah, totally heard that. Love you too. I will go do that thing or tell that person that one. No? Okay, dinner? Okay, yeah. I do it all the time. And there are sometimes, I've been married 13 years now, and occasionally my brain goes on autopilot without me knowing it. And she'll ask me a question, did you know that? And I can recite the facts really well because my brain caught up on the details. But then it misses one very important detail. Any guys know what I'm talking about? Anybody else have this matter? Thank you. There's just a couple of guys. You're sitting next to your spouses, aren't you? And you don't want to admit it. But we have this same problem sometimes when it comes to God. We tune out. Or you have the other problem. You're talking so much, you're not letting God speak at all. 21st century church, we have a problem. We have a listening problem. We tend to view God as a genie. We look at God and we are the one that does all the talking. We're going through something, we're going to talk God's ear off. You're going through struggle, you're going through the hardest part of your life. You're going to be the one doing all the talking. Like, God, will you fix this? Will you please do this? Why aren't you listening to me? God, would you do this? Would you do this? Would you do this? And God's like, would you take a breath and let me talk? And it's very easy for us to only go to God when we have something to say, but when he wants to speak to us, we're nowhere to be found. We talk, then we complain we can't hear him. And listen, I wrote this in my notes this way, and I'm going to say this as boldly as Paul would this morning. We need to shut up for a minute and actually let God speak. And it's not just us in this room. This is a church problem globally. It is a Christian problem globally in the year 2024. We need to shut up for a minute and let God actually speak to us. We don't have all the answers, but guess who does? If in your personal life there was somebody who came up to you and said, I can answer every problem you've got right now, you would be taking more notes than you ever did in college. You would sit there, you would listen intently, you would phone away every distraction gone. I want to listen to what you have to say because you have the answer, but yet when it comes to God, we tune him out. God is saying, you need to hear. You got to hear. In order to believe, in order to call, you got to hear first. Proverbs 18:12 through 15 says, haughtiness, which is arrogance, goes before destruction. Humility precedes honor. Spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. The human spirit can endure a sick body, but who can bear a crushed spirit? I love this. Intelligent people are always ready to learn. Their ears are open for knowledge. When it comes to our faith and our relationship with God, what kind of person do you want to be? I think we would all say we want to be an intelligent person. We want to be well-versed, but yet we have a listening problem. But in order for any of us to have heard about Jesus, someone had to tell us. 14 goes on, and how can they hear about him unless somebody tells them? This is the part in this cycle, going backwards, that it starts to jump from us to somebody else. But here's the deal. In this cycle, if you do it right, that somebody else should become you at some point. This is a little bit of Craigology, and what I mean by that is just I'm kind of reading between the lines of this text for just a second and trying to get inside the mind of Paul. But I think when he writes these points, it is to remind us something. He wants to remind us that everybody has a role to play in pointing people to Jesus. Because this same formula, like I said, has been happening for the last 2,000 years. Constantly, people will tell, they hear, they believe, they call. And then we'll go on to the sent and go in just a second. But this is the cycle that happens over and over again. If anybody do I have any TV people? You like TV or movies? Anybody like that? That's kind of your go-to way to relax and wind down. I'm that guy. I like media. I like content. And a lot of times in movies and TV, they will utilize a tool called a flashback sequence. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Citizen Kane, Oppenheimer, if you watched it last year, Inception, Forrest Gump. I mean, they all utilize this flashback sequence. And it's a tool that directors and writers will use to help clarify a point, to help move character development forward. Helps reveal something about somebody. If you've got a wedding scene and the groom is bawling his eyes out and uncontrollable weeping, they may do a flashback. And you're like, well, why is he crying so much? They'll do a flashback and show you the reason why from his childhood that this is a big deal. I think if we were writing and watching a movie of this text right now, this is where a flashback sequence would happen. Because if I were a betting man, I would say nearly everybody in this room can trace their faith journey back to somebody who told them about Jesus. A parent, a pastor, a life group leader, a teacher, a brother, a sister, Bob the Tomato, I don't care who it is, you were told likely about who Jesus is. And this should do two things for us. It should, number one, remind us that this thing is bigger than we are. That the gospel of Jesus is so much bigger than we are. Everybody should be connected to this. It goes on for generations, and it went on for generations before you. Second thing it should do is motivate us to do the same, to pick up that mantle and continue this cycle. Some of you guys know our story, Lauren and I's story, a little bit, but we, like I said, we've been married 13 years now. We had our first kid last year. So we were married nearly 12 years without a kid. That was not by design. It wasn't a plan of ours. And I've told some people, and I've said it briefly up here before, and it's opened up so many conversations because I told people. But Lauren and I, when we got married, we had a 5-year plan. We were going to wait 5 years, and then we were going to have kids. Well, about 18 months to 2 years into our marriage, we were like, okay, maybe we're ready earlier than we thought. And so we thought it would happen pretty quick, didn't happen. That 2 years turned into 5. We're like, okay, well, you know, it's not a big deal. We're still on track with the plan we had. That 5 years turned into 10 quickly. And I'm going to be honest with you, she would tell you the same. Mother's Days were hard for us, for her especially. Father's Days were tough. Before COVID, we would go to Macau, China once a year for a mission trip. And it always happened where we were there on Father's Day. And I'm a dude in my 30s. Over there, you know the population, you know. So I would walk in. They just expected that I had a whole litter of kids, I guess, walking around. And so when the Father's Day service would happen, they would give a gift to all the dads. They would get to me and just assume, and they would hand me a gift. I was like, no, I'm not a dad. And that would just sting a little bit. They would like, I don't know how to, that kind of situation. And it was always just something that was in us. We wanted it. I mentioned I'm a TV guy. Lauren is too. One of Lauren's favorite shows is Friends. Any other people love Friends? Okay. I mean, it's like the most popular show in the world, I think, other than The Office. But there's a scene where Chandler and Monica are dealing with a similar thing. They're having a hard time having kids, and they go the adoption route. Chandler tracks down the girl who's given up her baby and says, look, it's going to take a while for me to become a dad, to learn how to be a dad, but she's a mom without a baby. And that's how I felt about Lauren. She was a mom that did not have a kid yet. And it was hard for us at times. It was really hard at times. We did a great job putting on a brave face, but it was hard. There was a lot of times it was hard, especially when you're a youth pastor and you've been doing it for a while, and you got former students now on their second kid and you don't have one yet. 2022, it was about May, I think, right back there in that corner. Some friends of ours were dealing with the same thing. Married 12 years, didn't have a kid, and wanted one. It was a Wednesday night. We had just finished up some youth stuff here. And they came by. They were going to borrow some stuff for us. And we sat right back there when they told us they were having a baby. This was 2 months before we found out we were having Ellie. They're our best friends. We were so happy for them. but also just crushed. Because now it's happening for somebody else that went through the same thing that we're going through. Why won't it happen for us? So we were so happy, and we wanted to be so happy, but at the same time, we got home that night, just kind of drove home a little bit in silence. Of course, fast forward 2 months later, July 2022, Lauren tells me, hey, we're having a baby. I didn't believe her at first. I was so happy. We both were. We went and celebrated it on the border. Come on, birria tacos. It was great. And me, I wanted to tell everybody right then. I'm like, let's post it right now. Let's call our families, do everything right now. If you're a parent, you know, you got to wait a little bit. And we knew we really needed to wait just to double check. I mean, it had been a while. We want to make sure everything was good. But the second we were able to and felt comfortable about telling everybody in the world, we told everybody in the world. I'd walk by random strangers in Walmart. Hey, guess what? I know you don't know me. I say all that, and I set it up in that way because I wanted to tell the world, because I had a story to tell. My life just got changed. Something just happened, and I wanted to tell people. And if Jesus has impacted your life in that kind of way, my goodness, why are you not telling people? If Jesus has done that, I got a story. I want to tell you about Jesus. I want to tell you about what he did in my life. You can't contain it. And you don't have to be a pastor or a preacher. You don't have to lead Kid Life or serve in Beebe. You don't have to do all those. You don't have to be credentialed. You don't have to go through. If Jesus has changed your life, tell somebody about it. Some of the best Christians, I'm a little bit out of time, bear with me for just a second, but some of the best Christians I know, the most on fire people, came from the worst situations. Why? Because their life changed drastically, dramatically, and they want the world to know. I grew up a church kid. I know a lot of you did too. You grew up a church kid. You've just been around church your whole life. We live in the South. You know about Jesus. You grow up watching VeggieTales and all that kind of stuff. McGee and Me. That's what you did. And I used to joke, man, I wish I did meth so I had a story. That's kind of what I thought. I want that radical transformation. I want that Saul to Paul conversion moment where just bam, it happens. And I kind of just eased into it, like sipping a bowl of soup. I wanted that bam. But you don't have to have either of those. If Jesus has done something in your life, you need to tell people about it. Because if you back up one step further, the last point is to go. It's to be sent. Verse 15, and how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? The minute you make a decision for Jesus, you're up for active duty. It's time to go. It's not time just to sit there and just go, okay, this is great. I have this relationship and now I'm cool. No, the work starts then. You think it's hard going from where you were to becoming a follower of Jesus and making that decision? The real work starts now. Because he is sending every one of us. It's about availability. Are you willing and available to let God do what he wants to do in your life? Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8 says, then I heard a voice from the Lord saying, who will I send and who will go for us? And I said, here am I. Send me. Here am I is a volunteer position. Here am I doesn't come with bonuses or incentives. Here am I doesn't come from the depth. It does come from the depth of your character. Here am I is expressed from a place of deep passion. When something has happened to you, here am I says, that's something deep inside of me that I really can't control and contain. In God's plan, willingness is the soil for sent. Say it again. Willingness is the soil for sent. If you are willing, God will plant seeds in you. You're like, I don't know who I'm supposed to talk to. Just be willing. Let God do the rest. Let him direct you. Let him send you. Let him purpose you. Let him point you in the right direction. Let him grow you. You just need to be willing. Here am I. You hear that verse all the time, and it tends to tie in with mission trips. Here I am, send me to Africa, send me to Asia, send me to the parts of the world where nobody knows anything. But here am I also applies to your workplace, your family. When we encounter Christ, we can do one of two things. You can walk away, or you can walk with him. That's the choice we have. Acts 1:8 says, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And I want to leave that up for just a second, Wayne, because I want to read this again, but I want to make it personal. Because it's easy for those places to get lost in the context of what he's trying to say. But you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem. That's Searcy. It's where you're at right now. I think Kevin said it a couple of weeks ago. You may not want to be here right now, but guess what? You're here. So right now, be a witness here. All Judea, Samaria, that's Arkansas. That's America. That's the region you're in, the place that goes beyond where your home is. And then to all the other parts of the earth. All the other parts of the earth, I love how it's structured. Again, talking about structure, because the rest of the world is the last thing. It starts at home. It starts where you are right now. You do not have to wait until you get the right job or the kids graduate or whatever. It starts right now where you are. And if you do this, then the cycle begins again. Because you are sent to tell. And when you tell, somebody hears. And when they hear, they believe. And when they believe, they call on Jesus. And when they call on Jesus, he answers. And then when he answers, they are sent. Then they are sent to tell. And then they tell and somebody else hears. And then somebody else believes. And the cycle keeps going on for generations, spreads like a virus, spreads like wildfire. This wasn't in my notes, and I'm sick of talking about COVID. I would rather never say that word again in my life. But when COVID first happened and it first hit, what did they tell people to do? Isolate. Give it a couple weeks. Just stay at home. Don't touch anybody. Don't interact with anybody. Why? So it wouldn't spread. It's the exact opposite of what Jesus wants to happen with this faith, with this gospel. No. Interact with people because it spreads. Touch lives. Tell people. Talk about what Jesus did. Let it spread like wildfire. Do not, and listen, if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down in big, bold letters. I don't have it on the screen for you to take a picture of. It's not going to be on YouVersion, but if you get nothing else I've said today, I want you to get this one point. Do not let this cycle end with you. Do not let it end with you. Keep it going. Tell somebody. Teach in kid life. Serve at VBS. Tell your kids. Tell your parents. Tell your coworkers. Lead your family in it. Be an example in it. Walking in Walmart. Going through wherever it is. Wherever your steps lead you. Tell people. Be an example. Amen? You guys just stand with me this morning. I'm wrapping up. And as you bow your heads, I believe this, that there is, every person in here is at one of those spots. You're at one of those levels in the cycle. So with every eye closed and just focusing in for just a minute on you and Jesus only for just a second, I want you to ask yourself, which one of those, where am I at right now in my own life? Maybe you're at the hearing stage. You're at the very beginning. Guess what? You just heard. You just heard about Jesus. So now your next step is to believe. And hopefully I presented you with some evidence and facts that you can do that. And you can move quickly to the next step, which is to call. Maybe you've been presented with the facts before, but you've never believed. It's time to sink in, dig in, research, ask people, talk to it, whatever you can do to get to that place of belief. Some of you, you believe in Jesus, you know he is who he says he is, but you have not done the physical, the action part. You haven't taken that step of faith. You hadn't jumped out of the plane just yet. You know it can hold you, you know you'll land safely, but you haven't done it yet. Today is the day. As the word says multiple times, if you just call on him, he will answer and he will save. Maybe you're like, Craig, I've been a Christian for a long time. I've prayed that prayer. Then for you, he is sending you right now. And it may not have been a Saul to Paul kind of booming voice in the darkness and a flash of light getting your attention, telling you to go, but God is sending you whether you realize it or not. It's time to ask him, what can I do? Who can I tell? And maybe there's some of you who, you know you've been sent. You know who or where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do. But that telling part, that's another scary, faith-like thing that requires you to step out of that airplane. And it's a really hard thing to do. You're not sure how they'll take it. You're not sure the response. You may not even sure the right words to say. You may be terrified you're going to flub it up. You're going to say the wrong thing. Can I rest your mind for that for just a second? I didn't plan on going here. Sorry. God has this amazing thing that he does inside of people when they tell people about Jesus. Because in your mind, you could think you have messed the thing up so badly, you said the wrong thing. But guess what? God can still get through that. So don't worry about being perfect. Again, just be willing and available. So God, right now, over every person in this room, wherever they are right now, I ask you to give them boldness, give them courage to take a step, give them courage to do whatever it is you've asked them to do. And I want to highlight two of those areas and ask two questions and just ask for a response. And that's why I want nobody looking around, because this is scary for some people. It's scary for them to take this step and do this action. We don't want to put any extra pressure right now on them. But if you're ready, if you've never made that decision, if you've never called on Jesus and you want to do that today, I want to ask you to take a huge, big, bold step and just lift up a hand so myself and our prayer team can be praying. Just lift up a hand. Thank you, guys. My goodness, thank you, guys. That's big boldness, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Listen, for those that raised your hand, I'm going to challenge you, don't leave this building without talking to somebody. Find a leader, find a volunteer, find myself, and just say, what's my next step? We want to help you with that. The next group of people I want to talk to is, you're already a Christian. You believe in Jesus. You got a relationship, but you have not been doing the telling part very well. And you want boldness and courage to take a step out and tell somebody. If that's you in this place, would you just lift up your hand as well? We want to pray for you too. You need that boldness. You need that courage, that shot of adrenaline to do it. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Same thing goes for you guys. And if you need help in this, come find me. Come find a leader, a pastor. We want to help you with that. Jesus, right now, for every person who raised a hand, for every person who really wanted to but just couldn't pull that trigger, God, whatever part of the cycle they're in right now, God, I pray that you begin to just open up your eyes to them. Open up their ears, speak to them. Elijah tried to find you in thunder and lightning and earthquakes and wind and fire, and it was in the still small voice that you were there, God. I pray for a still small voice moment in people's lives this morning. Let us reconnect with you. In Jesus' name.